Many Lives, Many Masters, written and read by Dr. Brian L. Weiss.
Everything comes when it must come. A life cannot be rushed, cannot be worked on a schedule as so many people want it to be. We must accept what comes to us at a given time and not ask for more. But life is endless, so we never die. We were never really born.
That was the voice of Catherine. In 1980, suffering from debilitating anxieties and phobias, Catherine began treatment with Dr. Brian L. Weiss, a prominent Miami psychiatrist. The revelations that came in their sessions profoundly changed them both. Many Lives, Many Masters is the true story of their discoveries.
I know that there is a reason for everything. Perhaps at the moment that an event occurs, we have neither the insight nor the foresight to comprehend the reason, but with time and patience it will come to light. So it was with Catherine. When I first met her in 1980, she was 27 years old. She had come to my office seeking help for her anxiety, panic attacks, and phobias. Although these symptoms had been with her since childhood, in the recent past they had become much worse. Every day she found herself more emotionally paralyzed and less able to function. She was terrified and understandably depressed. For 18 months I used conventional methods of therapy to help her overcome her symptoms. When nothing seemed to work, I tried hypnosis. In a series of trance states, Catherine recalled past life memories that proved to be the causative factors of her symptoms. She also was able to act as a conduit for information from highly evolved spirit entities, and through them she revealed many of the secrets of life and of death. In just a few short months, her symptoms disappeared, and she resumed her life, happier and more at peace than ever before. Nothing in my background as a scientist and psychiatrist had prepared me for this. I was absolutely amazed when these events unfolded. I do not have a scientific explanation for what happened. There is far too much about the human mind that is beyond our comprehension. Many Lives, Many Masters is my small contribution to the ongoing research in the field of parapsychology, especially the branch dealing with our experiences before birth and after death. Every word that you will be hearing is true. I have added nothing, and I have deleted only those parts that were repetitious. I have slightly changed Catherine's identity to ensure confidentiality. The first time I saw Catherine, she was wearing a vivid crimson dress and was nervously leafing through a magazine in my waiting room. She was visibly out of breath. For the previous 20 minutes, she had been pacing the corridor outside the Department of Psychiatry offices, trying to convince herself to keep her appointment with me and not run away. Catherine is an extraordinarily attractive woman with medium-length blonde hair and hazel eyes. At that time, she worked as a laboratory technician in the hospital where I was chief of psychiatry, and she earned extra money modeling swimwear. I ushered her into my office, past the couch, and to a large leather chair. We sat across from each other, my semicircular desk separating us. Catherine leaned back in her chair, silent, not knowing where to begin. I waited, preferring that she choose the opening, but after a few minutes, I began inquiring about her past. On that first visit, we began to unravel who she was and why she had come to see me. In answer to my questions, Catherine revealed the story of her life. She was the middle child, reared in a conservative Catholic family in a small Massachusetts town. Her brother, born 3 years earlier than she, was very athletic, and he enjoyed a freedom that she was never allowed. Her younger sister was the favorite of both parents. When we started to talk about her symptoms, she became noticeably more tense and nervous. Her speech was rapid, and she leaned forward, resting her elbows on the desk. Her life had always been burdened with fears. She feared water, feared choking to the extent that she could not swallow pills, feared airplanes, feared the dark, and she was terrified of dying. In the recent past, her fears had begun to worsen. In order to feel safe, she often slept in the walk-in closet in her apartment. She suffered 2 to 3 hours of insomnia before being able to fall asleep. Once asleep, she would sleep lightly and fitfully, awakening frequently. The nightmares and sleepwalking episodes that had plagued her childhood were returning. As her fears and symptoms increasingly paralyzed her, she became more and more depressed. During the first session, I kept trying to gently nudge her back to her childhood. Because Catherine remembered amazingly few events from her early years, I made a mental note to consider hypnotherapy as a possible shortcut to overcome this repression. She could not remember any particularly traumatic moments in her childhood that would explain the epidemic of fears in her life. As she strained and stretched her mind to remember, isolated memory fragments emerged. When she was about 5 years old, she had panicked when someone had pushed her off a diving board into a swimming pool. She said that even before that incident, however, she had never felt comfortable in water. When Catherine was 11, her mother had become severely depressed. Her mother's strange withdrawal from the family necessitated visits to a psychiatrist with ensuing electroshock treatments. These treatments had made it difficult for Catherine's mother to remember things. This experience with her mother frightened Catherine, but as her mother improved and became herself again, Catherine said that her fears dissipated. Her father had a long-standing history of alcohol abuse, and sometimes Catherine's brother had to retrieve their father from the local bar. Her father's increasing alcohol consumption led to his having frequent fights with her mother, who had then become moody and withdrawn. However, Catherine viewed this as an accepted family pattern. Things were better outside the home. She dated in high school and mixed in easily with her friends, most of whom she had known for many years. However, she found it difficult to trust people, especially those outside her small circle of friends. After high school, Catherine completed a 2-year technical program, emerging as a laboratory technician. Armed with a profession and encouraged by her brother's move to Tampa, Catherine landed a job in Miami at a large teaching hospital affiliated with the University of Miami School of Medicine. She moved to Miami in the spring of 1974 at the age of 21. Catherine's life in a small town had been easier than her life in Miami turned out to be, yet she was glad she had fled her family problems. During her first year in Miami, Catherine met Stuart. Married, Jewish, and with 2 children, he was totally different from any other man she had ever dated. He was a successful physician, strong and aggressive. There was an irresistible chemistry between them, but their affair was rocky and tempestuous. Something about him drew out her passions and awakened her. At the time Catherine started therapy, her affair with Stuart was in its 6th year and very much alive, if not well. Catherine could not resist Stuart, although he treated her poorly, and she was furious at his lies, broken promises, and manipulations. Several months prior to her appointment with me, Catherine had required vocal cord surgery for a benign nodule. She had been anxious prior to the surgery, but she was absolutely terrified upon awakening in the recovery room. It took hours for the nursing staff to calm her. After her recovery in the hospital, she sought out Dr. Edward Poole. Ed was a kindly pediatrician whom Catherine had met while working in the hospital. They had both felt an instant rapport and had developed a close friendship. Catherine talked freely to Ed, telling him of her fears, her relationship with Stuart, and that she felt she was losing control over her life. He insisted that she make an appointment with me, and only me, not with any of my associate psychiatrists. Catherine's fears and phobias worsened. She began having 2 recurrent nightmares. In one, a bridge collapsed while she was driving across it. Her car plunged into the water below, and she was trapped and drowning. In the second dream, she was trapped in a pitch-black room, stumbling and falling over things, unable to find a way out. Finally, she came to see me. "18 months of intensive psychotherapy passed, with Catherine coming to see me once or twice a week. She was a good patient, verbal, capable of insights, and extremely eager to get well. During that time, we explored her feelings, thoughts, and dreams. Her recognition of recurrent behavior patterns provided her with insight and understanding. She remembered many more significant details from her past, such as her merchant seaman father's absences from the home and his occasional violent outbursts after drinking too much. She understood much more about her turbulent relationship with Stuart, and she expressed anger more appropriately. I felt that she should have been much improved by now. Patients almost always improve when they remember unpleasant influences from their past, when they learn to recognize and correct maladaptive behavior patterns, and when they develop insight and view their problems from a larger, more detached perspective. But Catherine had not improved. And then a strange thing happened. Although she was intensely afraid of flying and had to fortify herself with several drinks while she was on the plane, Catherine accompanied Stuart to a medical conference in Chicago in the spring of 1982. While there, she pressured him into visiting the Egyptian exhibit at the Art Museum, where they joined a guided tour. When the guide began to describe some of the artifacts in the exhibit, she found herself correcting him, and she was right. The guide was surprised. Catherine was stunned. How did she know these things? Why did she feel so strongly that she was right, so sure of herself that she corrected the guide in public? Perhaps the memories were forgotten from her childhood. At her next appointment, she told me what had happened. Months earlier, I had suggested hypnosis to Catherine, but she was afraid and she resisted. Because of her experience at the Egyptian exhibit, she now reluctantly agreed. Hypnosis is an excellent tool to help a patient remember long-forgotten incidents. There is nothing mysterious about it. It is just a state of focused concentration. Under the instruction of a trained hypnotist, the patient's body relaxes, causing the memory to sharpen. I had hypnotized hundreds of patients and had found it helpful in reducing anxiety, eliminating phobias, changing bad habits, and aiding the recall of repressed material. I felt confident that hypnosis could help Catherine. I instructed Catherine to lie on the couch with her eyes slightly closed and her head resting on a small pillow. At first, we focused on her breathing. With each exhalation, she released stored-up tension and anxiety. With each inhalation, she relaxed even more. Then I instructed her to visualize a bright white light at the top of her head, inside her body. She felt sleepier and sleepier, more and more peaceful and calm. Eventually, at my instruction, the light filled her body and surrounded her as well. I counted backwards slowly from 10 to 1. With each number, she entered a deeper level of relaxation. Her trance state deepened. She was able to concentrate on my voice and exclude all background noises. By the count of 1, she was already in a moderately deep state of hypnosis. The entire process had taken about 20 minutes. After a while, I began to regress her, asking her to recall memories of progressively earlier ages. She was able to talk and to answer my questions while maintaining a deep level of hypnosis. At age 3, she remembered awakening in her dark bedroom and being aware that her father was in her room. He reeked of alcohol then, and she could smell it now. He touched her and rubbed her, even down there. She was terrified and began to cry, so he covered her mouth with his rough hand. She couldn't breathe. In my office, on my couch, 25 years later, Catherine began to sob. I felt that we had the information now, the key to the lock. I was sure that her symptoms would improve quickly and dramatically. I softly suggested to her that the experience was over, that she was no longer in her bedroom, but was resting quietly, still in a trance. The sobbing ended. I took her forward in time to her current age. I awakened her after I had instructed her, by post-hypnotic suggestion, to remember all that she had told me. We spent the remainder of the session discussing her suddenly vivid memory of the trauma with her father. I tried to help her accept and integrate her new knowledge. She now understood her relationship with her father, his reactions to her, his aloofness, and her fear of him. She was still shaking when she left the office, but I knew the understanding she had gained was worth the momentary discomfort. In the drama of uncovering her painful and deeply repressed memories, I had entirely forgotten to look for the possible childhood connection to her knowledge of the Egyptian artifacts. But at least she understood more about her past. She had remembered several terrifying events, and I expected a significant improvement in her symptoms. But despite this new understanding, the next week she reported that her symptoms remained intact, as severe as ever. I was surprised. I could not understand what was wrong. Could something have happened earlier than age 3? We had uncovered more than sufficient reasons for her fears of choking, of the water, of the dark, and of being trapped, yet the piercing fears and symptoms, the uncontrollable anxiety, were all still devastating her waking moments. Her nightmares were as terrifying as before. I decided to regress her further. Slowly, I took Catherine back to the age of 2, but she recalled no significant memories. I instructed her firmly and clearly, "Go back to the time from which your symptoms arise." I was totally unprepared for what came next.
I see white steps leading up to a building, a big white building with pillars open in front. There are no doorways. I'm wearing a long dress, a sack made of rough material. My hair is braided, long blonde hair.
I was confused. I wasn't sure what was happening. I asked her what the year was and what her name was.
Aronda. I am 18. I see a marketplace in front of the building. There are baskets. You carry the baskets on your shoulders. We live in a valley. There is no water. The year is 1863 BC. The area is barren, hot, and sandy. There is a well, no rivers. Water comes into the valley from the mountains.
After she related more topographical details, I told her to go several years ahead in time and to tell me what she saw.
There are trees and a stone road. I see a fire with cooking. My hair is blonde. I'm wearing a long, coarse brown dress and sandals. I am 25. I have a girl child whose name is Cleestra. She's Rachel.
I knew that Rachel was Catherine's niece in her present life, and that they have always had an extremely close relationship.
It's very hot.
I was startled by what Catherine was telling me. My stomach knotted, and the room felt cold. Her visualizations and recall seemed so definite, she was not at all tentative. Names, dates, clothes, trees, all seen vividly. What was going on here? How could the child she had then be her niece now? I was even more confused. I had examined thousands of psychiatric patients, many under hypnosis, and I had never come across fantasies like this before, not even in dreams. I instructed her to go forward to the time of her death. I wasn't sure how to interview someone in the middle of such an explicit fantasy, or memory, but I was on the lookout for traumatic events that might underlie current fears or symptoms. The events around the time of death could be particularly traumatic, and from what Catherine began to tell me, I deduced that a flood or tidal wave was devastating the village.
There are big waves knocking down trees. There's no place to run. It's cold. The water is cold. I have to save my baby, but I cannot. Just have to hold her tight. I drown. The water chokes me. I can't breathe. Can't swallow. Salty water. My baby is torn out of my arms.
Catherine was gasping and having difficulty breathing. Suddenly, her body relaxed completely, and her breathing became deep and even.
I see clouds. My baby is with me, and others from my village. I see my brother.
She was resting. This lifetime had ended. She was still in a deep trance. I was stunned. Previous lifetimes? Reincarnation? My clinical mind told me that she was not fantasizing this material, that she was not making this up. Her thoughts, her expressions, the attention to particular details, all were different from her conscious state. The whole gamut of possible psychiatric diagnoses flashed through my mind, but her psychiatric state and her character structure did not explain these revelations. Schizophrenia? No, she had never had any evidence of a cognitive or thinking disorder. She had never experienced any auditory hallucinations. She had never heard voices, for example. She had never had any visual hallucinations or visions while awake, or any other type of psychotic episode. She was not delusional, nor was she out of touch with reality. She did not have multiple or split personalities. There was only one Catherine, and her conscious mind was totally aware of this. She had no sociopathic or antisocial tendencies. She was not an actress. She did not use drugs, nor did she ingest hallucinogenic substances. Her use of alcohol was minimal. She had no neurological or psychological illnesses that could explain this vivid, immediate experience while hypnotized. Since Catherine had recognized her niece in an ancient lifetime, I impulsively asked her if I was present in any of her lifetimes. I was curious about my role, if any, in her remembrances. She responded quickly, in contrast to the previous very slow and deliberate recall.
You are my teacher, sitting on a ledge. You teach us from books. You are old with gray hair. You're wearing a white dress with gold trim. Your name is Diogenes. You teach us symbols, triangles. You are very wise, but I don't understand. The year is 1568 BC.
This date was approximately 1,200 years before the noted Greek cynic philosopher Diogenes. The name was not an uncommon one in ancient Greece. I assumed that a white dress with gold trim meant a Greek toga. And so the session ended. After Catherine left, and over the next several days, I pondered the details of the hypnotic regression. It was natural for me to ponder. Very few details emerging from even a normal therapy hour escaped my obsessive mental analysis, and this session was hardly normal. In addition, I was very skeptical about life after death, reincarnation, out-of-body experiences, and related phenomena. After all, the logical part of me ruminated, this could be her fantasy. I wouldn't actually be able to prove any of her assertions or visualizations. But I was also aware, although much more dimly, of a further and less emotional thought. Keep an open mind, the thought said. True science begins with observation. Her memories might not be fantasy or imagination. There might be something more than meets the eye, or any of the other senses. Keep an open mind. Get more data. I was the oldest of 4 children, all spaced 3 years apart. We belonged to a conservative Jewish synagogue in Red Bank, a small town near the New Jersey seashore. I was the peacemaker and statesman in my family. My father was more involved with religion than the rest of us. He took it very seriously, as he took all of life. His children's academic achievements were the greatest joys in his life. My mother was always expressing her love. No boundary stood in her way. A simpler person than my father, she used guilt, martyrdom, terminal embarrassment, and vicarious identification with her children as manipulative tools, all without a second thought. Yet she was rarely gloomy, and we could always count on her love and support. My father had a good job as an industrial photographer, and although we always had plenty of food, money was very tight. We had to divide 6 people into our small 2-bedroom garden apartment. Life in this small apartment was hectic and noisy, and I sought refuge in my books. By the time I received a full scholarship to Columbia University, I was a serious and studious young man. Academic success continued to come easily. I majored in chemistry and was graduated with honors. I decided to become a psychiatrist because the field combined my interest in science and my fascination with the workings of the human mind. In the meantime, I had met Carol during a summer vacation at a Catskill Mountain hotel where I was working as a busboy, and she was a guest. She was both bright and beautiful. Everything seemed to be falling into place. I was becoming a scientist and learning to think in a logical, dispassionate, prove-it kind of way. Medical school and residency at Yale University further crystallized this scientific method. I joined the new breed of biological psychiatrists, those merging the traditional psychiatric theories and techniques with the new science of brain chemistry. I wrote many scientific papers, lectured at local and national conferences, and became quite a hotshot in my field. I was a bit obsessive, intense, and inflexible, but these were useful traits in a physician. I felt totally prepared to treat any person who walked into my office therapy. Then Catherine became Miranda, a young girl who had lived in 1863 BC. Or was it the other way around? With a new, insatiable hunger for any scientific papers that had been published on reincarnation, I hunted through the medical libraries. I studied the works of Ian Stevenson, M.D., a well-respected professor of psychiatry at the University of Virginia, who has published extensively in the psychiatric literature. Dr. Stevenson has collected over 2,000 examples of children with reincarnation-type memories and experiences. Many exhibited xenoglossy, the ability to speak a foreign language to which they were never exposed. His case reports are carefully complete, well-researched, and truly remarkable. I read an excellent scientific overview by Edgar Mitchell. With great interest, I examined the ESP data from Duke University and the writings of Professor C.J. Ducasse of Brown University, and I intently analyzed the studies of Dr. Martin Eban, Dr. Helen Wambach, Dr. Gertrude Schmiedler, Dr. Frederick Lentz, and Dr. Edith Fiore. The more I read, the more I wanted to read. The evidence seemed to be overwhelmingly supportive, yet I still doubted. Overwhelming or not, I found it difficult to believe. Nonetheless, both Catherine and I, in our own ways, had already been profoundly affected by the experience. Catherine was improving emotionally, and I was expanding the horizons of my mind. Catherine had been tormented by her fears for many years and was finally feeling some relief. Whether through actual memories or vivid fantasies, I had found a way to help her, and I was not going to stop now. At the beginning of the next session, prior to the hypnotic induction, Catherine related a dream about a game being played on old stone steps, a game played with a checkerboard with holes in it. The dream had seemed especially vivid to her. I now told her to go back beyond the normal limits of space and time, to go back and see if her dream had roots in a previous reincarnation.
I see steps leading up to a tower, overlooking the mountains but also the sea. I am a boy. My hair is blonde, strange hair. My clothes are short, brown and white, made from animal skins. Some men are on top of the tower, looking out. Guards. They are dirty. They play a game like checkers, but not. The board is round, not square. They play with sharp, dagger-like pieces which fit into the holes. The pieces have animal heads on them. From the Netherlands, around 1473. I'm in a seaport now. The land goes down to the sea. There is a fortress and water. I see a hut. My mother is cooking in a clay pot.
She was progressed to her death. At this point in our sessions, I was still looking for the single overwhelming traumatic event that could either cause or explain her current life symptoms. Even if these remarkably explicit visualizations were fantasies, and I was unsure of this, what she believed or thought could still underlie her symptoms. After all, I had seen people traumatized by their dreams. Some could not remember whether a childhood trauma actually happened or occurred in a dream, yet the memory of that trauma still haunted their adult lives. Catherine began to speak.
There are boats like canoes, bright painted. Providence area. We have weapons, spears, slings, bows and arrows, but bigger. There are big, strange oars on the boat. Everyone has to row. We may be lost. It is dark. There are no lights. I am afraid. There are other boats with us. I'm afraid of the animals. We sleep on dirty, foul-smelling animal skins. We are scouting. My shoes look funny, like sacks, ties at the ankles, from animal skins. My face is hot from the fire. My people are killing the others, but I am not. I do not want to kill. My knife is in my hand.
Suddenly she began to gurgle and gasp for breath. She reported that an enemy fighter had grabbed her from behind, around the neck, and had slit her throat with his knife. She saw the face of her killer before she died. It was Stuart. He looked different then, but she knew it was he. She next found herself floating above her body, observing the scene below. She drifted up to the clouds, feeling perplexed and confused. Soon she felt herself being pulled into a tiny, warm space. She was about to be born.
Somebody is holding me. Someone who helped with the birth. She's wearing a green dress with a white apron. She has a white hat folded back at the corners. The room has funny windows, many sections. The building is stone. My mother has long, dark hair. She wants to hold me. There's a funny, rough nightshirt on my mother. It hurts to rub against it. It feels good to be in the sun and to be warm again. It's the same mother I have now.
During the previous session, I had instructed Catherine to closely observe the significant people in these lifetimes to see whether she could identify them as significant people in her present lifetime. According to most writers, groups of souls tend to reincarnate together again and again, working out their karma, which are debts owed to others and to the self, and lessons to be learned. Catherine moved ahead in time, although she could not identify a year. Her name was Elizabeth.
I'm older now, with a brother and 2 sisters. I see the dinner table. My father is there. He's Edward.
Her friend Edward, the pediatrician, was her father.
My mother and father are fighting again. The food is potatoes and beans. He's mad because the food is cold. They fight a lot. He's always drinking. He hits my mother.
Her voice was frightened now, and she was trembling visibly.
He punches the kids. He's not like he was before, not the same person. I don't like him. I wish he would go away.
I asked her to advance in time.
I'm married now. Our house has 1 big room. My husband has blonde hair. I don't know him.
By that she meant that he has not appeared in Catherine's present lifetime.
We have no children yet. He's very nice to me. We love each other and we're happy. I see books with funny old covers. The big one closes with a strap. It's the Bible. There are big fancy letters, Gaelic language. We live inland, not near the sea. County Brennington? I see a farm with pigs and lambs. This is our farm.
She again went ahead in time.
We have 2 boys. The older is getting married. I can see the church steeple, a very old stone building.
Suddenly her head hurt, and Catherine was in pain, clutching her left temple area. She reported that she had fallen on the stone steps, but she recovered. She died of old age, in her bed at home with her family around. She floated out of her body after her death, but this time she was not perplexed or confused.
I am aware of a bright light. It's wonderful. You get energy from this light.
She was resting after death, in between lifetimes. Minutes passed in silence. Suddenly she spoke, but not in the slow whisper she had always used previously. Her voice was now husky and loud, without hesitation.
Our task is to learn, to become godlike through knowledge. We know so little. You are here to be my teacher. I have so much to learn. By knowledge, we approach God, and then we can rest. Then we come back to teach and help others.
I was speechless. Here was a lesson from after her death, from the in-between state. What was the source of this material? This did not sound at all like Catherine. She had never spoken like this, using these words, this phraseology. At that moment, I did not realize that although Catherine had uttered the words, she had not originated the thoughts. She was relaying what was being said to her. She later identified the masters, highly evolved souls, not presently in body, as the source. They could speak to me through her. Not only could Catherine be regressed to past lifetimes, but now she could channel knowledge from the beyond. Beautiful knowledge. I struggled to retain my objectivity. A new dimension had been introduced. Catherine had never read the studies of Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross or Dr. Raymond Moody, who have both written about near-death experiences. She had never heard of the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Yet she was relating similar experiences to those described in these writings. This was a proof of sorts. If only there were more facts, more tangible details I could verify. After she awakened, Catherine remembered the details of her past lives, as always. However, she could not remember anything that happened after her death as Elizabeth. In the future, she would never remember any details of the in-between states. She would remember only the lifetimes. Between our sessions, Catherine was becoming increasingly psychic. She had intuitions about people and events that proved to be true. During the hypnosis, she had begun to anticipate my questions before I had a chance to ask them. Many of her dreams had a precognitive or foretelling bent. On one occasion, when her parents came to visit her, her father expressed tremendous doubt about what was happening. To prove to him that it was true, she took him to the racetrack. There, right before his eyes, she proceeded to pick the winner of every race. I was both shocked and fascinated by her psychic abilities, especially the episode at the racetrack. Something very odd was happening over these past several weeks, and I struggled to keep my perspective. I could not deny her psychic abilities, and if these abilities were real and could produce tangible proofs, could her recitations of past life events also be true?
I see a square white house with a sandy road in front. People on horses are going back and forth. There are trees, a plantation, a big house with a bunch of smaller houses, like slave houses. It's very hot. It's in the south. Virginia?
After the excitement of last week's session, I was eager to reach the in-between state again. We had already spent 90 minutes exploring her lifetime as a servant. I was hungry for a more spiritual lesson. Forsaking my patience, I advanced her to her death.
It's hard to breathe. My chest hurts so much.
Catherine was gasping in obvious pain.
My heart hurts. It's beating fast. I'm so cold. My body's shaking.
She quietly died. Floating up to the ceiling, she could see her body in the bed, a small, shriveled woman in her 60s. She was just floating, waiting for someone to come and help her. She became aware of a light, feeling herself drawn toward it. The light was becoming brighter and more luminous. Now Catherine's head began to roll slowly from side to side, as if she were scanning some scene. Her voice was again husky and loud.
They tell me there are many gods, for God is in each of us.
I recognized the voice from the in-between live state by its huskiness as well as by the decidedly spiritual tone of the message. What she said next left me breathless, pulling the air from my lungs.
Your father is here, and your son, who is a small child. Your father says you will know him because his name is Avram, and your daughter is named after him. Also, his death was due to his heart. Your son's heart was also important, for it was backward, like a chicken's. He made a great sacrifice for you out of his love. His soul is very advanced. His death satisfied his parents' debts. Also, he wanted to show you that medicine could only go so far, that its scope is very limited.
Catherine stopped speaking, and I sat in an awed silence as my numbed mind tried to sort things out. The room felt icy cold. Catherine knew very little about my personal life. On my desk, I had a baby picture of my daughter, grinning happily with her two bottom baby teeth in an otherwise empty mouth. My son's picture was next to it. Otherwise, Catherine knew virtually nothing about my family or my personal history. The greatest tragedy in my life had been the unexpected death of our firstborn son, Adam, who was only 23 days old when he died, early in 1971. About 10 days after we had brought him home from the hospital, he had developed respiratory problems and projectile vomiting. The diagnosis was extremely difficult to make. Total anomalous pulmonary venous drainage with an atrial septal defect, we were told. It was as if his heart were turned around, backward, extremely, extremely rare. Heroic open-heart surgery could not save Adam, who died several days later. We mourned for months, our hopes and dreams dashed. Our son Jordan was born a year later, a grateful balm for our wounds. After Adam's death, I firmly decided that I would make psychiatry my profession. I was angry that modern medicine, with all of its advanced skills and technology, could not save my son, a simple, tiny baby. My father had been in excellent health until he experienced a massive heart attack early in 1979 at the age of 61. He survived the initial attack, but his heart wall had been irretrievably damaged, and he died 3 days later. This was about 9 months before Catherine's first appointment. My father had been a religious man, more ritualistic than spiritual. His Hebrew name, Avram, suited him better than the English, Alvin. 4 months after this death, our daughter, Amy, was born, and she was named after him. Here, in 1982, in my quiet, darkened office, a deafening cascade of hidden, secret truths was pouring upon me. I was swimming in a spiritual sea. My arms were gooseflesh. Catherine could not possibly know this information. There was no place even to look it up. My father's Hebrew name, that I had a son who died in infancy from a 1 in 10 million heart defect, my brooding about medicine, my father's death, and my daughter's naming. It was too much, too specific, too true. This unsophisticated laboratory technician was a conduit for transcendental knowledge. And if she could reveal these truths, what else was there? I needed to know more. Who, I sputtered, who is there? Who tells you these things?
The masters. The master spirits tell me. They tell me I have lived 86 times in physical state.
Catherine's breathing slowed, and her head stopped rolling from side to side. She was resting. I wanted to go on, but the implications of what she had said were distracting me. My life would never be the same. A hand had reached down and irreversibly altered the course of my life. All of my reading, which had been done with careful scrutiny and skeptical detachment, fell into place. Catherine's memories and messages were true. My intuitions about the accuracy of her experiences had been correct. I had the facts. I had the proof. Gradually, I began to change as a person, and at first I did not understand why. I felt more hope, more joy, more purpose, and more satisfaction in my life. Then it dawned on me that I was losing the fear of death. I was less afraid of losing others, even though I would certainly miss them. How powerful the fear of death is. People go to such great lengths to avoid the fear. Midlife crises, affairs with younger people, cosmetic surgeries, exercise obsessions, accumulating material possessions, procreating to carry on a name, striving to be more and more youthful, and so on. We are so frightfully concerned with our own deaths, we sometimes forget the purpose of our lives. As the weeks passed, Catherine continued to improve. Her fears and anxieties diminished. Each week she appeared a bit more serene, a bit softer and more patient. She was more confident, and people were drawn to her. Catherine felt more loving, and others gave love back to her. But I was still not sure why she was so much better. Could the spiritual experience itself be helping? Could the knowledge that death is not what it appears to be contribute to a sense of well-being and a diminution of fears? Could the entire process, not just the memories themselves, be part of the cure? Catherine agreed to allow my wife Carol to attend our sessions. Carol is a well-trained, highly skilled psychiatric social worker, and I wanted her opinion about these incredible happenings. After I told her what Catherine had said about our son Adam and about my father, she was eager to help. I had no trouble taking notes of every word from the Lifetimes when Catherine whispered slowly, but the Masters spoke much more quickly, and I decided to tape record everything. After awakening from the trances, Catherine continued to remember many details of her past life recall, but she still remembered nothing at all of the after-death experiences, nothing from the in-between state, nothing of the Masters, or of the incredible knowledge that the Masters had revealed. I asked her what the term Masters meant to her. She thought this was a golf tournament. And although she was improving rapidly, she still had difficulty integrating the concept of reincarnation with her traditional Catholic theology. Therefore, I decided not to tell her about the Masters yet. Besides, I wasn't sure how to break the news to someone that she is an incredibly talented trance medium who can channel wonderful, transcendental knowledge from the Master Spirits. And so our work continued. Catherine relived a time when she had been a British sailor named Christian who survived terrifying battle wounds. After she left his life and was floating in the in-between state, I asked her if she had any thoughts about her life as Christian.
I should have been more forgiving, but I wasn't. I did not forgive the wrongs that people did to me, and I should have. I didn't forgive the wrongs. I held them inside, and I harbored them for many years. I see eyes. Eyes.
Eyes, I echoed, sensing the contact. What kind of eyes?
The eyes of the Master Spirits. But I must wait. I have things to think about.
After minutes of tense silence, Catherine's head suddenly began to roll from side to side, and her voice, hoarse and firm, signaled the change.
There are many souls in this dimension. I am not the only one. We must be patient. That is something I never learned either. There are many dimensions.
I asked her whether she had been here before.
I have been to different planes at different times. Each one is a level of higher consciousness. What plane we go to depends on how far we've progressed.
What lessons did you have to learn in order to progress?
That we must share our knowledge with other people. That we all have abilities far beyond what we use. Some of us find this out sooner than others. That you should check your vices before you come to this point. If you do not, you carry them over with you to another life. Only we can rid ourselves of the bad habits that we accumulate when we are in a physical state. The masters cannot do that for us. If you choose to fight and not to rid yourself, then you will carry them over into another life. And only when you decide that you are strong enough to master the external problems, then you will no longer have them in your next life. We must also learn not to just go to those people whose vibrations are the same as ours. It is normal to feel drawn to somebody who is on the same level that you are, but this is wrong. You must also go to those people whose vibrations are wrong with yours. This is the importance in helping these people. We are given intuitive powers we should follow and not try to resist. Those who resist will meet with danger. We are not sent back from each plane with equal powers. Some of us possess powers greater than others because they have been accrued from other times. Thus, people are not all created equal. But eventually, we will reach a point where we will all be equal.
Catherine paused. I knew these thoughts were not hers. She had no background in physics or metaphysics. She knew nothing about planes and dimensions and vibrations. But beyond that, the beauty of the words and thoughts, the philosophical implications of these utterings, these were all beyond Catherine's capabilities. She had never talked in such a concise, poetic manner. I could feel another, higher force struggling with her mind and vocal cords to translate these thoughts into words so that I could understand. No, this was not Catherine. I wondered what our founding fathers would have thought about the proposition that all humans are not created equal. People are born with talents, abilities, and powers accrued from other lifetimes. But eventually we will reach a point where we will all be equal, she had said. I suspected that this point was many, many lifetimes distant. I thought about the young Mozart and his incredible childhood talents. Was this also a carryover of former abilities? I thought about how people tended to congregate in homogeneous groups, avoiding and often fearing outsiders. This was the root of prejudice and group hatreds. We also must learn not to just go to those people whose vibrations are the same as ours, Catherine had said. To help these other people, I could feel the spiritual truths in her words.
I see apple trees and a house, a white house. I live in the house. The apples are rotten, worms, no good to eat. There is a swing on the tree.
I asked Catherine to look at herself.
I have light hair, blonde hair. I'm 5 years old. My name is Catherine.
I was surprised. She had entered her present lifetime. She was Catherine at age 5. But she must be there for some reason. Did something happen there, Catherine?
My father is angry at us, 'cause we're not supposed to be outside. He's hitting me with a stick. It's very heavy. It hurts. I'm afraid. He won't stop till he hurts us. Why does he do this to us? Why is he so mean?
I asked her to see her life from a higher perspective and to answer her own questions. I had recently read about people being able to do this. Some writers call this perspective one's higher self or greater self. I was curious whether Catherine could reach this state if it existed. If she could, this would be a powerful therapeutic technique, a shortcut to insight and understanding.
He never wanted us. He feels we're an intrusion in his life. He doesn't want us.
Your brother, too?
Yes, my brother even more. They never planned for my brother. They weren't married when he was conceived.
This proved to be startling new information for Catherine. She had never known about the premarital pregnancy. Her mother later confirmed the accuracy of Catherine's revelation. Although she was recounting a lifetime, Catherine now exhibited a wisdom and a perspective about her life that had previously been restricted to the in-between or spiritual state. Somehow there was a higher part of her mind, a sort of superconscious. Perhaps this was the higher self that others have described. Although not in contact with the masters and their spectacular knowledge, nevertheless, in her superconscious state she possessed profound insights and information, such as her brother's conception. The conscious Catherine, when awake, was much more anxious and limited, much simpler and comparatively superficial. Meanwhile, her father was tormenting her, and the reasons were becoming evident. "He has many lessons to learn?" I stated in a questioning way.
Yes, so he does.
"Do you know what he has to learn?"
This knowledge is not revealed to me. What is revealed to me is what is important to me, what concerns me. Each person must be concerned with him or herself, with making him or herself whole. We have lessons to learn, each one of us. They must be learned one at a time, in order. Only then can we know what the next person needs, what he or she lacks or what we lack to make us whole.
She spoke in a soft whisper, and her whisper conveyed a feeling of loving detachment. When she spoke again, the childlike voice had returned.
He's making me sick. He's making me eat this stuff that I don't want. It's some food, lettuce, onions, stuff I hate. He's making me eat it, and he knows I'm gonna be sick, but he doesn't care.
Catherine began to gag. She was gasping for air. I again suggested that she view the scene from a higher perspective, that she needed to understand why her father acted this way. She spoke in a raspy whisper.
It must fill some void in him. He hates me because of what he did. He hates me for that, and he hates himself.
I had nearly forgotten about the sexual assault when she was 3 years old.
So he must punish me. I must have done something to make him do that.
She was only 3 years old, and her father was drunk, yet she had carried this guilt deep within her ever since. I explained the obvious. "You were just a baby. You must now relieve yourself of this guilt. You didn't do anything. What could a 3-year-old do? It wasn't you. It was your father."
He must have hated me then, too. I knew him before, but I cannot draw on that information now. I must go back to that time.
I gave her detailed instructions to help her reach their previous relationship. "You are in a deep state. In a moment, I am going to count backward from 3 to 1. You will be in a deeper state and will feel totally safe. Your mind will be free to roam back in time again, back to the time when the connection to your father in your current life began, back to the time that had the most significant bearing on what happened in your childhood between you and him. When I say 1, you will go back to that lifetime and remember it. It is important for your cure. You can do that. 3, 2, 1. There was a long pause.
I do not see him, but I see people being killed. We have no right to abruptly halt people's lives before they have lived out their karma. And we are doing it. We have no right. They will suffer greater retribution if we let them live. When they die and go to the next dimension, they will suffer there. They will be left in a very restless state. They will have no peace. They will be sent back, but their lives will be very hard. And they will have to make up to those people that they hurt for the injustices that they did against them. They are halting these people's lives, and they have no right to do that. Only God can punish them, not us. They will be punished. They are gone.
The Master Spirits had given us one more message today, strong and clear. We are not to kill, no matter what the circumstances. Only God can punish. I now schedule Catherine's weekly sessions at the end of the day because they were lasting several hours. When she came in the following week, she still had that peaceful look about her. She had talked with her father on the phone. Without giving him any details, she had, in her way, forgiven him. I had never seen her this serene. I marveled at the rapidity of her progress. It was rare for a patient with such chronic, deep-seated anxieties and fears to improve so dramatically. "I have a question to ask," I said, the next time she was resting in the peaceful light that comes between lives.
Of whom?
"Somebody, you or the masters," I hedged. "I think the understanding of this will help us. The question is this: do we choose the times and the manner of our birth and our death? Can we choose our situation? Can we choose the time of our passing over? I think understanding that will ease your fears. Is there anyone there who can answer that question?" The room felt cold. When Catherine spoke again, her voice was deeper and more resonant. It was a voice I had never heard before. It was the voice of a poet.
Yes, we choose when we will come back into our physical state and when we will leave. We know when we have accomplished what we were sent down here to accomplish. We know when the time is up, and you will accept your death. For you know that you can get nothing more out of this lifetime. When you have had the time to rest and re-energize your soul, you are allowed to choose your re-entry back into the physical state. Those people who hesitate, who are not sure of their return here, they might lose the chance that was given them, a chance to fulfill what they must when they're in the physical state.
I knew immediately and completely that this was not Catherine speaking. "Who is speaking to me?" I implored. "Who is talking?" Catherine answered in her familiar soft whisper.
I don't know. Somebody who controls things, but I don't know who it is. I can only hear his voice and try to tell you what he says.
Catherine also knew that this knowledge was not coming from herself, not from the subconscious, nor from the unconscious, not even her superconscious self. She was somehow listening to, then conveying to me, the words or thoughts of someone very special, someone who controls things. Thus another master had appeared, different from the one or several from whom the previous wisdom-laden messages had come. This was a new spirit, with a characteristic voice and style, poetic and serene. This was a master who spoke about death without any hesitation, yet whose voice and thoughts were steeped with love. The love felt warm and real, yet detached and universal. It felt blissful, yet not smothering or emotional or binding. It relayed a feeling of loving detachment or detached loving kindness, and it felt distantly familiar. "What should you do and I do to make ourselves better?" I asked Catherine. "Are our paths the same?" The answer came from the master who had spoken earlier of intuitive powers and of returning from comas. The voice, the style, the tone were all different from both Catherine's and from the masculine poetic master who had just spoken.
Everybody's path is basically the same. We all must learn certain attitudes while we're in physical state. Some of us are quicker to accept them than others. Charity, hope, faith, love. We must all know these things and know them well. It's not just one hope, and one faith, and one love. So many things feed into each one of these. There are so many ways to demonstrate them, and yet we've only tapped into a little bit of each one. People of the religious orders have come closer than any of us have because they've taken vows of charity and obedience. They've given up so much without asking for anything in return. The rest of us continue to ask for rewards and justifications for our behavior, when there are no rewards that we want. The reward is in doing, but doing without expecting anything, doing unselfishly.
"What can I do to best help Catherine to overcome her fears and anxieties?" I asked, "and to learn her lessons?" Is this the best way, or should I change something, or follow up in a specific area? How can I help her the best? The answer came in the deep voice of the poet master. I leaned forward in my chair.
You are doing what is correct. But this is for you, not for her.
For me?
Yes. What we say is for you.
Not only was he referring to Catherine in the third person, but he said we. There were indeed several master spirits in attendance. Can I know your names? I asked, immediately wincing at the mundane nature of my question. I need guidance. The answer was a love poem, a poem about my life and my death. The voice was soft and tender, and I felt the loving detachment of a universal spirit. I listened in awe.
You will be guided in time. You will be guided in time. When you accomplish what you have been sent here to accomplish, then your life will be ended. But not before then. You have much time ahead of you. Much time.
When Catherine arrived for her next appointment 1 week later, I was ready to play the tape of our last incredible dialogue. After all, she was providing me with celestial poetry, in addition to past life recall. I told her that she had related information from after-death experiences, even though she had no memory at all of the in-between or spiritual state. She was reluctant to listen. Overwhelmingly improved and happier, she had no need to listen to this material. Besides, it was all somewhat eerie to her. I prevailed upon her to listen. It was wonderful, beautiful, uplifting, and it came through her. I wanted to share it with her. She listened to her soft whisper on the tape for only a few minutes, and then she made me turn it off. She said that it was just too weird and made her uncomfortable. Silently, I remembered the words of the Master. This is for you, not for her. Catherine and I had not had a traditional psychotherapy session for months. None was necessary. We would chat for a few minutes to catch up on the events of the week, then move quickly to the hypnotic regression. Whether due to the actual memories of major traumas or daily mini-traumas, or to the process of reliving the experiences, Catherine was virtually cured. Her phobias and panic attacks had just about disappeared. She had no fear of death or dying. She was no longer afraid of losing control. Psychiatrists are now using high doses of tranquilizers and antidepressant medicines to treat people with Catherine's symptoms. In addition to the medicines, the patients are also often in intensive psychotherapy, where they are attending phobia group therapy sessions. Many psychiatrists believe that symptoms such as Catherine's have a biological basis, that there are deficiencies in one or several brain chemicals. But now, in a period of weeks, without the use of medicines, traditional therapy, or group therapy, Catherine was nearly cured. This was not just the suppression of symptoms, nor the gritting of teeth and living through it, with a life racked by fears. This was a cure, the absence of symptoms, and she was radiant, serene, and happy beyond my wildest hopes. I pondered the therapeutic purpose of exploring Catherine's past lives. Once we had stumbled into this new realm, her improvement was dramatically rapid, without any medicine. There is some powerful curative force in this realm, a force apparently much more effective than conventional therapy or modern medicines. The force includes remembering and reliving not just momentous traumatic events, but also the daily insults to our bodies, minds, and egos. In my questions, as we scanned lifetimes, I was looking for the patterns of these insults, patterns such as chronic emotional or physical abuse, poverty and starvation, illness and handicaps, persistent persecution and prejudice, repeated failures, and so on. I also kept an eye out for those more piercing tragedies, such as a traumatic death experience, rape, mass catastrophe, or any other horrifying event that might leave a permanent imprint. The technique was similar to reviewing a childhood in conventional therapy, except that the time frame was several thousand years, rather than the usual 10 or 15 years. Therefore, my questions were more direct and more leading than in conventional therapy. but the success of our unorthodox exploration was unquestionable. She, and others I later would treat with hypnotic regression, was being cured with tremendous rapidity. But were there other explanations for Catherine's past life memories? Could the memories be carried in her genes? This possibility is scientifically remote. Genetic memory requires the unbroken passage of genetic material from generation to generation. Catherine lived all over the earth, and her genetic line was interrupted repeatedly. She would die in a flood with her offspring, or be childless, or die in her youth. Her genetic pool ended and was not transmitted. And what of her survival after death and the in-between state? There was no body and certainly no genetic material, and yet her memories continued. No, the genetic explanation had to be discarded. What about Jung's idea of the collective unconscious, a reservoir of all human memory and experiences that could somehow be tapped into? Divergent cultures often contain similar symbols, even in dreams. According to Jung, the collective unconscious was not personally acquired but inherited somehow in the brain structure. It includes motives and images that spring anew in every culture without relying upon historical tradition or dissemination. I thought Catherine's memories were too specific to be explained by Jung's concept. She did not reveal symbols and universal images or motives. She related detailed descriptions of specific people and places. Jung's ideas seemed too vague, and there was still the in-between state to consider. And what about the masters and their messages? This came through Catherine, but was not of Catherine, and their wisdom was also reflected in Catherine's memories of lifetimes. I knew that this information and these messages were true. I knew this not only from many years of careful study of people, their minds and brains and personalities, but I also knew this intuitively, even before the visit from my father and my son. The dramatic messages and events cascading upon me in my office mirror deep changes in my personal and family life. The transformation gradually crept into my awareness. I would look at my children and my wife and wonder if we had been together before. Had we chosen to share the trials and tragedies and joys of this life? Were we ageless? I felt a great love and tenderness toward them. I realized that their flaws and faults are minor and not really so important. Love is. At our next session, the poet master came to us once more with a message whose meaning I was already feeling in my own life.
Patience and timing. Everything comes when it must come. A life cannot be rushed, cannot be worked on a schedule as so many people want it to be. We must accept what comes to us at a given time and not ask for more. But life is endless, so we never die. We were never really born. We just pass through different phases. There is no end. Humans have many dimensions, but time is not as we see time, but rather in lessons that are learned.
As the treatment continued, spirits came to us again and again, imparting their knowledge of life and of death. There are 7 planes in all, Catherine related one day, in a voice loud and deep, a voice that was not hers. 7 planes.
Each one consisting of many levels, one of them being the plane of recollection. On that plane, you are allowed to collect your thoughts. You are allowed to see your life that has just passed. Those of the higher levels are allowed to see history. They can go back and teach us by learning about history. But we of the lower levels are only allowed to see our own life that has just passed. We have debts that must be paid. If we have not paid out these debts, then we must take them into another life in order that they may be worked through. You progress by paying your debts. Some souls progress faster than others, When you're in physical form and you are working through a life, if something interrupts your ability to pay that debt, you must return to the plane of recollection, and there you must wait until the soul you owe the debt to has come to see you. And when you both can be returned to physical form at the same time, then you are allowed to return. But you determine when you are going back. You determine what must be done to pay that debt. You will not remember your other lives, only the one you have just come from. Only those souls on the higher level, the sages, are allowed to call upon history and past events, to help us, to teach us what we must do. There are 7 planes, 7 through which we must pass before we are returned. One of them is the plane of transition. There you wait. In that plane, it is determined what you will take back with you into the next life. We will all have a dominant trait. This might be greed, or it might be lust, but whatever is determined, you will need to fulfill your debts to those people. Then you must overcome this in that lifetime. You must learn to overcome greed. If you do not, when you return, you will have to carry that trait, as well as another one, into your next life. The burdens will become greater. With each life that you go through, and you did not fulfill these debts, the next one will be harder. If you fulfill them, you will be given an easy life. So you choose what life you will have. In the next phase, you are responsible for the life you have. You choose it.
This message was apparently not from a master. He identified himself as we of the lower levels, in comparison with those souls on a higher level, the sages. But the knowledge transmitted was both clear and practical. I wondered about the 5 other planes and their qualities. Was the stage of renewal one of those planes? And what about the learning stage and the stage of decisions? All of the wisdom revealed through these messages from souls in various dimensions of the spiritual state was consistent. The style of delivery differed, the phraseology and grammar differed, the sophistication of the verse and vocabulary differed, but the content remained coherent. I was acquiring a systematic body of spiritual knowledge. This knowledge spoke of love and hope, faith and charity. It examined virtues and vices, debts owed to others and to oneself. It included past lifetimes and spiritual planes between lives. And it talked of the soul's progress through harmony and balance, love and wisdom, progress toward a mystical and ecstatic connection with God. During the time I was treating Catherine, Carol's mother, Minette, was dying from the cancer that had spread from her breast to her bones and liver. The process had been going on for 4 years and could no longer be slowed down by chemotherapy. She was a brave woman who stoically endured the pain and weakness, but the disease was accelerating, and I knew that her death was approaching. I shared Catherine's experiences and revelations with Minette. I was mildly surprised that she, a practical businesswoman, readily accepted this knowledge and wanted to learn more. I gave her books to read, and she did so avidly. She arranged for and took a course with Carol and me in Kabbalah, the Jewish mystical writings that are centuries old. Reincarnation and the in-between planes are basic tenets of Kabbalistic literature, yet most modern-day Jews are unaware of this. Minette's spirit strengthened as her body deteriorated. Her fear of death diminished. She began to anticipate being reunited with her beloved husband, Ben. She believed in the immortality of her soul, and this helped her endure the pain. She was holding on to life, awaiting the birth of another grandchild, her daughter Donna's first baby. Minette met Catherine in the hospital during one of her treatments, and their eyes and words joined peacefully and eagerly. Catherine's sincerity and honesty helped convince Minette that the existence of an afterlife was indeed true. A week before she died, Minette was admitted to the hospital's oncology floor. Carol and I were able to spend time with her, talking about life and death and what awaited us all after death. A lady of great dignity, Minette decided to die in the hospital, where the nurses could care for her. Donna, her husband, and their 6-week-old daughter came to spend time with her and to say goodbye. We were almost continuously with her. About 6 in the evening of the night Minette died, Carol and I, having just arrived home from the hospital, both experienced a strong urge to go back. The next 6 or 7 hours were filled with serenity and a transcendental spiritual energy. Although her breathing was labored, Minette had no more pain. We talked about her transition to the in-between state, the bright light, and the spiritual presence. She reviewed her life, mostly silently, and struggled to accept the negative parts. She seemed to know that she couldn't let go until this process was completed. She was waiting for a very specific time to die in the early morning. She grew impatient for this time to come. Minette was the first person I had guided to and through death in this manner. She was strengthened, and our grief was assuaged by the entire experience. Gradually, I discovered that my ability to heal my patients had greatly expanded, not just with phobias and anxieties, but especially in death and dying or grief counseling. I intuitively knew what was wrong and what directions to take in therapy. I was able to convey feelings of peacefulness, calm, and hope. After Minette's death, many others who were either dying or who were the survivors of a loved one's death came for help. Many were not ready to know about Catherine or the literature about life after death. But even without imparting such specific knowledge, I felt that I could still deliver the message, a tone of voice, an empathic understanding of the process and of their fears and feelings, a look, a touch, a word, all could get through at some level and touch a chord of hope, of forgotten spirituality, of shared humanity, or even more. And for those ready for more, to suggest readings and to share my experiences with Catherine and others was like opening a window to a fresh breeze. The ones who were ready were revived. They gained insights even more rapidly. I believe strongly that therapists must have open minds. Just as more scientific work is necessary to document death and dying experiences, such as Catherine's, so is more experiential work necessary in the field. Therapists need to consider the possibility of life after death and integrate it into their counseling. They do not have to use hypnotic regressions, but they should keep their minds open, share their knowledge with their patients, and not discount their patients' experiences. People are now devastated by threats to their mortality, the plague of AIDS, nuclear holocaust, terrorism, disease, and many other catastrophes hang over our heads and torture us daily. Many teenagers believe that they won't live past their 20s. This is incredible, reflecting the tremendous stresses in our society. On the individual level, Minette's reaction to Catherine's messages is encouraging. Her spirit had strengthened, and she had felt hope in the face of great physical pain and bodily deterioration. But the messages are for all of us, not just the dying. There is hope for us too. We need more clinicians and scientists to report on other Catherines, to confirm and expand her messages. The answers are there. We are immortal. We will always be together. Over 4 years have passed since Catherine and I shared the incredible experiences I have told you about. We have both been profoundly changed. Catherine remains cured, without any recurrence of her original difficulties. She is now free to fully enjoy her life, no longer crippled by her disabling symptoms. She has found a sense of happiness and contentment that she never thought was possible. She no longer fears illness or death. Life has a meaning and purpose for her now that she is balanced and in harmony with herself. She radiates an inner peace that many wish for, but few attain. She feels more spiritual. To Catherine, what has happened is all very real. She does not doubt the veracity of any of it, and she accepts it all as an integral part of who she is. She has no interest in pursuing the study of psychic phenomena, feeling that she knows in a way that cannot be learned from books or lectures. People who are dying, or who have a family member dying, often seek her out. They seem drawn to her. She sits and talks to them, and they feel better. My life has changed almost as drastically as Catherine's. I have become more intuitive, more aware of the hidden, secret parts of my patients, colleagues, and friends. I seem to know a great deal about them, even before I should. My values and life goals have shifted to a more humanistic, less accumulative focus. I still write scientific papers, lecture at professional meetings, and run the Department of Psychiatry. But now I straddle two worlds: the phenomenal world of the five senses, represented by our bodies and physical needs, and the greater world of the non-physical planes, represented by our souls and spirits. I know that the worlds are connected, that all is energy, yet they often seem so far apart. My job is to connect the worlds, to document carefully and scientifically their unity. During my entire experience with Catherine, I had been reluctant to discuss her revelations with other professionals. Actually, except for my wife Carol and a few others who were safe, I had not shared this remarkable information with others at all. I knew the knowledge from our sessions was both true and extremely important, yet anxiety about the reactions of my professional and scientific colleagues caused me to keep silent. I was still concerned with my reputation, career, and what others thought of me. But I am no longer concerned with the effect that telling Catherine's story may have on my career. The information that I have shared here is far more important and, if heeded, will be far more beneficial to the world than anything I can do on an individual basis in my office. I hope that you will be helped by what you have heard here. I hope that your own fear of death has been diminished, and that the messages offered to you about the true meaning of life will free you to go about living your life to the fullest, seeking harmony and inner peace, and reaching out in love to your fellow humans.